Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk all about Betty Davis. Now, Betty Davis was one of the most important female musicians of all time. She not only set herself apart from all that came before, but she blazed the trail for many who came ahead. She was a true artist, a free spirit, an interesting person, a whirlwind of a person. And her musical life really began in its very earliest days, insofar as her professional musicianry went, working with Don Costa, one of the finest arrangers of what they call classic pop music ever. He arranged some of Frank Sinatra's best work, including my favorite Frank Sinatra album, Sinatra and Strings. And she recorded with him. She went on to work with the Chambers Brothers, great sort of R&B rock fusion band. She was involved in a relationship with Hugh Masekela. She was involved in a relationship with Miles Davis, whose surname she obviously took. And it's her famous face that artistically appears on the cover of Field de Kilimanjaro, the wonderful 68 album of Miles Davis. But it was really when she recorded her own albums in the mid 70s that people really got an idea of just what she was trying to say and how she was trying to say it. It was Betty Davis with no strings attached. And these were the self-titled 73 album and the frankly even stronger They Say I'm Different from 1974 and Nasty Gal from 1975. Now, these albums were classic soul funk. And her vocals could be very piercing and wild on the one hand, very controlled on the other. Wonderful sense of rhythm, great sense of phrasing. But it was her attitude in many ways that really changed music because she couldn't really be classed as a sort of white Helen Reddy style feminist. She was not your traditional soul singer. She was someone that was almost like all of the best qualities of a man and all of the best qualities of a woman combined in an artistic project where you weren't really sure where the persona ended and the real person began. But that was intentional because these albums were meant to get your attention because they were very wild and very explicit. But then they were also meant to keep your attention because they were so well performed and frankly well produced. And there were great musicians on both of these albums. Mike Clark, great drummer, for instance, that was on her quintessential They Say I'm Different. The great blues guitarist Buddy Miles, Merrill Saunders on electric piano. Really, really wonderful stuff. And this continued on all of her albums. She played with really interesting musicians. Gil Evans, for instance, participated in arranging for her final album, Nasty Gal. Nicky Neal, a great drummer, not as well known as he ought to be, was on that. And so she was able to draw on both the musicians that weren't as well known, but that were very much a part of her life, and people that were huge stars in their own right. Her first album, for instance, the Pointer Sisters appeared on it as backing vocalists. Journey's Neil Sean played guitar. That's right. Larry Graham from, of course, wonderful solo career and his time in Sly and the Family Stone. Merrill Saunders again on that album. And so you can see that she really drew from an eclectic group of musicians to help form these three albums, which were, they became out, they went out of print for a while and they were kind of forgotten, but the last few years have seen them go back in print. They're luckily on Spotify and all of the usual streaming services. Some labels have even reissued them on vinyl. So at long last, she seems to be getting her due. And I say at long last because the records that she made at the time, they weren't huge sellers. She was on a small label. It didn't really have much of a budget behind it. And so only the people who really knew were in the know. But she continued pursuing various artistic projects through much of her life, even though she sort of stepped back from the music world before her death in 2022. But the material that she made in the mid 70s really not only stands the test of time, but listening to it in hindsight, we can see just how, even for a decade that was probably more experimental than any other decade of music, it was still very much ahead of its time. Like, subscribe. We will see you next time. Take care.